Why World War II started. Key causes. The world did not suddenly fall into the chaos of World War II. It was the result of years of tension, anger, and unfinished business left behind after World War I. When the First World War ended in 1918, Europe was left broken. Millions had died, empires had collapsed, and the Treaty of Versailles was signed in 1919 to punish Germany. But instead of creating peace, this treaty planted the seeds for the next great conflict. The 1930s brought more problems. The Great Depression spread poverty across the world, making people lose faith in democracy. Dictatorships grew stronger because they promised quick solutions. In Germany, Hitler ignored the Treaty of Versailles, secretly building an army and weapons. The League of Nations, created to keep peace, was too weak and failed to stop aggression. One by one, aggressive moves were made. Japan invaded Manchuria in 1931, and later China in 1937. Italy attacked Ethiopia in 1935. Germany reoccupied the Rhineland in 1936, annexed Austria in 1938, and then took part of Czechoslovakia. Each time, Britain and France protested but avoided war, hoping appeasement would satisfy Hitler. But Hitler was never satisfied. By 1939, Germany had signed a secret pact with the Soviet Union, the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. This agreement shocked the world because it meant that two enemies, Hitler and Stalin, promised not to fight each other and secretly planned to divide Eastern Europe. With this deal secured, Hitler was ready for his boldest move yet, the invasion of Poland. The causes of World War II were not a single event but a storm of issues. The harsh Treaty of Versailles, the rise of dictators, the failures of peacekeeping organizations, the hunger for territory, and the economic crisis. Together, they created a world where war became inevitable. On the morning of September 1st, 1939, the world awoke to thunder. German tanks rolled across the Polish border, fighter planes screamed overhead, and artillery fire shattered the peace. This was not a traditional attack. It was something the world had never seen before. A new style of warfare called blitzkrieg, or lightning war. Blitzkrieg combined speed, surprise, and overwhelming force. Instead of long, drawn-out battles like in World War I, the Germans used tanks, planes, and fast-moving troops to crush their enemy quickly. The Polish army, though brave, was no match for this modern war machine. Within days, cities were bombed, communications were broken, and Polish defenses collapsed. The invasion of Poland shocked the world. Britain and France, who had promised to protect Poland, now faced a choice. On September 3, 1939, both countries declared war on Germany. Yet their response was slow and cautious. They called it a war, but for months, very little happened in Western Europe. This strange pause became known as the Phony War. Soldiers waited on the French border, but no major battles were fought. Meanwhile, Poland's fate was sealed by a secret deal. Just weeks after Germany's invasion, the Soviet Union attacked Poland from the east, fulfilling its agreement with Hitler under the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. The country was torn apart between two powerful neighbors. By the end of September 1939, Poland had fallen, and the world realized that Hitler's words of expansion were not empty threats, they were deadly promises. After Poland, Germany turned west. In April 1940, Hitler launched invasions of Denmark and Norway, securing vital access to the sea and resources. The blitzkrieg method proved unstoppable once again. By May 1940, the German war machine rolled into Belgium, the Netherlands, and Luxembourg, preparing for its greatest test yet, the conquest of France. The beginning of World War II was marked by lightning speed and devastating power. The world that had hoped Hitler could be contained now understood the terrible reality. A new war had begun, fiercer and faster than anyone had imagined. By the spring of 1940, the war had moved west. Germany's attention shifted from Poland to Western Europe, and no country would stand in its path for long. In May 1940, the German army launched a massive attack on Belgium, the Netherlands, and Luxembourg, bypassing the heavily defended French border. The French military had prepared for a repeat of World War I strategies, but Hitler's blitzkrieg was faster, smarter, and far deadlier. Tanks tore through forests and fields, while fighter planes dominated the skies. Cities were bombed, railways destroyed, and communication lines severed. The Allies were stunned. Within weeks, German forces had penetrated deep into France. The French army, though large and well-trained, could not keep up with the speed and coordination of the German attack. Panic spread among civilians as they fled the advancing army, and the streets filled with chaos and fear. The situation grew even more desperate at Dunkirk, where hundreds of thousands of British and French soldiers were trapped on the beaches. Facing annihilation, a daring evacuation began. Over 9 days, more than 338,000 soldiers were rescued across the English Channel. Boats of every size, from naval destroyers to fishing vessels, crossed the stormy waters, carrying men to safety. Though a victory for the Germans on land, Dunkirk became a symbol of hope and resilience for the Allies. By June 1940, France had fallen. Paris was occupied, and the French government surrendered. The world watched in disbelief as one of Europe's great powers collapsed so quickly. Germany now controlled Western Europe, and Britain stood alone against Hitler's empire. But Hitler did not stop. He turned his eyes across the English Channel, preparing to invade Britain. The Battle of Britain began in July 1940, marking the first major campaign fought entirely by air forces. The German Luftwaffe unleashed relentless bombing raids on British cities, airfields, and military targets. For weeks, the skies above Britain burned with dogfights between German planes and the courageous Royal Air Force, RAF. Despite being outnumbered, the RAF used radar technology and brilliant tactics to fight back. British pilots, often young and inexperienced, showed extraordinary courage, defending their homeland against constant attacks. The civilian population endured nightly bombings, hiding in shelters as fires raged across towns and cities. Yet Britain refused to surrender. By October 1940, the Luftwaffe's failure to gain air superiority forced Hitler to cancel the planned invasion of Britain. It was a turning point, the first major defeat for Nazi Germany, proving that courage, strategy, and determination could challenge even the most powerful military machine. The expansion of the war in Western Europe showed both the terrifying strength of Germany and the resilience of those who dared to stand against it. From the fall of France to the skies of Britain, the world had entered a new, dangerous chapter of conflict, one that would soon engulf nations across the globe.
Eastern Front, Germany versus USSR, Operation Barbarossa. By the summer of 1941, Hitler had already conquered much of Western Europe, but his ambitions stretched far beyond. His eyes turned eastward, toward the vast lands of the Soviet Union. Despite having signed the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact in 1939, a non-aggression treaty with Stalin, Hitler had always seen the Soviet Union as Germany's ultimate prize, a land rich in resources and manpower, essential for his vision of a greater German empire. On June 22, 1941, the Germans launched Operation Barbarossa, the largest military invasion in history up to that time. Millions of German soldiers, tanks, and aircraft poured across the Soviet border, advancing along a front stretching over 1,800 miles. The Soviets, caught off guard, were unprepared for the scale and speed of the attack. Entire cities were surrounded, railways destroyed, and armies decimated. Blitzkrieg tactics were again used with devastating effect. Panzer divisions raced across the countryside while Luftwaffe bombers reduced towns and infrastructure to rubble. Millions of Soviet soldiers were captured, and vast territories fell into German hands within weeks. The early months of the invasion were catastrophic for the USSR. However, the Soviet Union was immense, and its people showed incredible resilience. As the German forces pushed deeper, the harsh Russian winter arrived, something Hitler had underestimated. Temperatures plummeted, tanks froze, and soldiers suffered from frostbite and exhaustion. The Soviets, retreating strategically, employed scorched earth tactics, destroying food supplies and infrastructure to slow the Germans. Key battles began to shape the course of the Eastern Front. Cities like Leningrad endured prolonged sieges, while Moscow became the focal point of a fierce and desperate defense. Soviet soldiers, alongside ordinary civilians, fought with determination, using the vastness of their homeland as an advantage. Reinforcements, new tanks, and winter equipment gradually turned the tide against the invaders. Operation Barbarossa demonstrated both the terrifying efficiency of the German military machine and the immense human cost of war. Millions of soldiers and civilians on both sides suffered, and the brutality of the Eastern Front would become a defining feature of World War II. The clash between Germany and the Soviet Union was not just a battle of armies, it was a battle of ideologies, endurance, and survival on an unprecedented scale. While Europe burned under the chaos of Hitler's conquests, another storm was brewing in the Pacific Ocean. Japan, driven by ambition and a need for natural resources, had been steadily expanding across Asia throughout the 1930s. The invasion of Manchuria in 1931 and later China in 1937 showed the world Japan's hunger for power. By 1941, the island nation sought to dominate the entire Pacific, threatening both British and American interests. The tension reached its peak on December 7, 1941. Early in the morning, Japanese aircraft launched a surprise attack on the United States naval base at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. The attack was swift and devastating. Battleships were sunk, aircraft destroyed, and more than 2,400 American servicemen lost their lives. In just a few hours, Japan had crippled the U.S. Pacific Fleet, believing it had bought itself time to expand across the Pacific. The following day, President Franklin D. Roosevelt declared war on Japan, famously calling it a date which will live in infamy. The United States, once hesitant to join the conflict in Europe, was now fully engaged in a global war. Japan's rise, fueled by a desire for resources such as oil, rubber, and minerals, had awakened the might of America. Japan's strategy was bold. They quickly captured territories across Southeast Asia, including the Philippines, Malaya, Singapore, and the Dutch East Indies. Each conquest provided valuable resources and strategic bases for further operations. However, their rapid expansion also stretched supply lines and exposed them to counterattacks. The Pacific War became a struggle of mobility, naval power, and air supremacy. Battles were fought over vast distances, from dense jungles to remote islands, where the conditions were harsh, and survival often depended on ingenuity and endurance. Japanese soldiers were fierce and determined, but the Allies, led by the United States, began to regroup. Technologies like aircraft carriers, radar, and code breaking would soon challenge Japan's dominance in ways the world had never seen. The attack on Pearl Harbor and the rapid rise of Japan marked the start of a brutal and sprawling conflict in the Pacific. It was a war fought across thousands of miles of ocean, where every island, every fleet, and every battle would carry the weight of nations and the fate of millions.
Turning points. Stalingrad Midway D-Day. By 1942, the war had reached a critical phase. Battles raged across Europe, Asia, and the Pacific, and the future of nations hung in the balance. The world would soon witness turning points that would change the course of World War II forever. In the East, Stalingrad became the stage for one of the most brutal battles in history. In the summer of 1942, German forces advanced into the Soviet Union, aiming to capture the industrial city of Stalingrad. The city, sitting on the banks of the Volga River, was strategically vital and symbolically significant. Hitler wanted it named after Stalin himself, believing that its fall would crush Soviet morale. The battle was unlike any the world had seen. Streets, factories, and homes became deadly battlegrounds as soldiers fought for every building, every corner. Urban warfare turned the city into a ruined labyrinth, and both sides suffered staggering losses. Winter set in, and the harsh Russian cold took its toll on the German army, which was now trapped by a massive Soviet counteroffensive. Starvation, freezing temperatures, and relentless attacks led to the surrender of nearly 300,000 German troops in February 1943. Stalingrad was a catastrophe for Hitler and a monumental victory for the Soviets, a turning point on the Eastern Front that marked the beginning of Germany's retreat. Meanwhile, across the vast Pacific, the Battle of Midway in June 1942 shifted the momentum in favor of the Allies. Japan, seeking to eliminate the United States as a naval power in the Pacific, launched an ambitious attack on Midway Atoll. But American intelligence had broken Japanese codes and anticipated the assault. In a stunning display of strategy and courage, U.S. naval forces sank 4 Japanese aircraft carriers, crippling Japan's offensive capabilities. Midway proved that intelligence, preparation, and timing could overcome raw power, and it marked the first major defeat for Japan in the Pacific. In Western Europe, the stage was set for the most ambitious operation of the war, D-Day. On June 6, 1944, the Allies launched Operation Overlord, the largest amphibious invasion in history, landing over 156,000 troops on the beaches of Normandy, France. Paratroopers dropped behind enemy lines, while naval bombardments softened German defenses. Soldiers faced fierce resistance, but courage, coordination, and sheer determination allowed the Allies to establish a foothold on the continent. D-Day marked the beginning of the liberation of Western Europe and a decisive step toward the ultimate defeat of Nazi Germany. These turning points, Stalingrad, Midway, and D-Day, were more than battles. They were moments when the tide of war shifted. They showed that no matter how powerful an enemy appeared, strategy, resilience, and unity could change the fate of nations. From the frozen streets of Stalingrad to the skies over Midway and the blood-soaked beaches of Normandy, the war was slowly moving toward a future that promised hope, but at an unimaginable cost.
By 1944, the Allies had gained momentum on every front. After the success of D-Day, Allied forces pushed steadily through France, liberating towns and cities, while the Red Army advanced relentlessly from the east, closing in on Germany. The Nazi regime, once feared for its unstoppable power, was now facing the inevitability of defeat. In April 1945, the war reached its final and most dramatic chapter in Europe, the Battle of Berlin. The city, the heart of Nazi Germany, became a fortress under siege. Soviet troops encircled Berlin, bombarding it from all sides. Streets were reduced to rubble, and the once proud city became a maze of destruction. German soldiers, many young and inexperienced, fought desperately, while civilians suffered amid the chaos. Inside the crumbling city, Hitler and his inner circle faced the collapse of their empire. As Soviet forces closed in, the reality of defeat became undeniable. On April 30, 1945, Adolf Hitler committed suicide in his bunker, a symbol of the end of Nazi domination. Days later, on May 2, Berlin fell completely to the Soviets, and the war in Europe was effectively over. Victory in Europe, or VE Day, was declared on May 8, 1945. The continent rejoiced, but the world still faced conflict in the Pacific. While Europe celebrated, Japan remained determined to continue the fight. The United States, seeking a swift end to the Pacific War, made a decision that would change history forever. In August 1945, American forces dropped atomic bombs on the cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The destruction was catastrophic. Tens of thousands of lives were instantly lost, and many more suffered from injuries and radiation in the following months. The bombs demonstrated the horrifying power of modern weapons and forced Japan to surrender. On August 15, 1945, Emperor Hirohito announced Japan's unconditional surrender, officially ending World War II. The final phase of the war left the world forever changed. Europe lay in ruins, millions of lives were lost, and the horrors of concentration camps revealed the full scale of human cruelty. Yet, amid the devastation, nations began to rebuild. International organizations like the United Nations were created to prevent future global conflicts. The lessons of the war were harsh, but clear. Unchecked ambition, hatred, and the failure to act against aggression could lead humanity to the brink of annihilation. World War II had ended, but its impact would be felt for generations. The courage, sacrifice, and suffering of millions shaped the modern world, reminding all that the price of freedom and peace is never small. With the guns finally silenced in 1945, the world faced the immense task of picking up the pieces. Cities lay in ruins, economies were shattered, and millions of people had lost their homes, their families, and their futures. Yet, amid this devastation, nations recognized the urgent need to prevent another catastrophe of such scale. From the ashes of war, a new vision for global cooperation began to take shape. One of the most significant outcomes was the creation of the United Nations, UN, in October 1945. Unlike the failed League of Nations, the UN was designed to be stronger, more inclusive, and committed to peace. Its mission was clear: to provide a platform where countries could resolve disputes diplomatically, protect human rights, and work together to rebuild war-torn nations. The UN symbolized hope, a reminder that humanity could rise above its conflicts and strive for a future of cooperation and understanding. However, peace came with new tensions. The wartime alliance between the United States and the Soviet Union, formed out of necessity to defeat Nazi Germany, quickly dissolved into suspicion and rivalry. Differences in ideology, capitalism versus communism, fueled mistrust and competition. Europe, divided physically and politically, became the stage for what would be known as the Cold War. Nations aligned with either the United States or the Soviet Union, preparing for decades of political maneuvering, espionage, and the constant threat of nuclear war. The aftermath of World War II also brought profound lessons. The sheer scale of human suffering highlighted the consequences of unchecked hatred, aggression, and prejudice. The world witnessed the horrors of the Holocaust, the devastation of cities, and the irreversible impact of modern warfare. These lessons reshaped education, diplomacy, and international law, emphasizing the importance of human rights, tolerance, and the need for global cooperation. Economically, countries embarked on ambitious reconstruction programs. The Marshall Plan helped rebuild Western Europe, while Japan and other nations in Asia undertook rapid recovery efforts. Technological advances accelerated, driven by wartime innovation, shaping the modern world in science, medicine, and industry. World War II left an indelible mark on every corner of the globe. It was a reminder of both the depths of human cruelty and the heights of human resilience. While the war ended in victory for the Allies, the lessons endured. Peace is fragile, vigilance is necessary, and unity is essential to prevent the tragedies of the past from repeating. The aftermath was not merely an end but a beginning, a chance to build a world that could remember the past, learn from it, and strive for a future where humanity would never again endure such unimaginable suffering. Final words fade with the image.